Skilla. Enhancing careers. Chapter 3. Cheesemaking process. Cheese consists of proteins and fat from milk, usually the milk of cows, buffalo, goats, or sheep. Most common cheeses are made with cow's milk, both because cow's milk is widely available and because it offers optimal amounts of fat and protein. Swiss, cheddar, Gouda, and other cheeses are made using cow's milk. Sheep's milk is usually drunk since it's very high in lactose, but it makes a fantastic base for cheese. Roquefort, Feta, Petit Basque, and Manchego are all made using sheep's milk. Goat's milk lends a distinctive tangy flavor to cheeses like Le Chevret and French Bucheron. Goat milk cheese is also known as chèvre. Although buffalo milk is not a common cheese ingredient, it is the traditional choice for mozzarella. However, most mass-produced mozzarella is made with cow's milk. Today, hundreds of types of cheese are produced world over. The style, texture, and flavor depends on the origin of the milk, the animal's diet, the process of pasteurization, butterfat content, the bacteria and mold, the processing, and finally aging. While herbs, spices, or wood smoke is used as flavoring agents, the yellow to red color of many cheeses is attributed to annatto. Cheese is highly valued for its portability, long life, and high content of fat, protein, calcium, and phosphorus. Cheese is more compact and has a longer shelf life than milk. The long storage life of some cheese, especially if it is encased in a protective rind, allows selling when markets are favorable. Although there are differences depending on the type of cheese, the general process of cheesemaking remains the same. Some cheeses are made from camel milk as well as from yak's milk in different geographies in the world. Another important ingredient in cheese is a coagulant, which helps the milk turn into curds. The coagulant may be a type of acid or rennet, which is a complex enzyme that is genetically engineered through microbial bioprocessing. Traditional rennet cheeses are actually made with rennin. The enzyme rennet is meant to replicate. Rennin is an enzyme that is naturally produced in the stomachs of calves and other mammals to help them digest milk. Cheese also includes sources of flavoring, such as salt, brine, spices, herbs, and even wine. The aging process is also important as even cheeses with identical ingredients will differ based on different aging processes. Conversion of milk to cheese is a natural process that requires some help from artisans, known as fromagers or, simply, cheesemakers. With so many different varieties of cheese, there are differences in the cheesemaking process, depending on what cheese is being made. However, all cheesemaking follows the same general process, especially when it comes to the earlier steps. There are 10 basic steps in cheesemaking as follows. Preparing the milk. Acidifying the milk. Curdling the milk. Cutting the curd. Processing the curd. Draining the whey. Cheddaring the cheese. Salting the cheese. Shaping the cheese. Aging/ripening the cheese. Preparing the milk. This process often involves pasteurization or more mild heat treatment. Heating the milk kills organisms that could cause the cheese to spoil and can also prime the milk for the starter cultures to grow more effectively. Once the milk has been heat-treated or pasteurized, it is cooled to 90 degrees Fahrenheit so it is ready for the starter cultures. Acidifying the milk. In this step, starter cultures to acidify the milk are added. Cheesemakers add starter and non-starter cultures to the milk to acidify it. Vinegar is used as an acidifying agent in some cases, and in cheeses like Paneer and Queso Fresco a bacteria is employed instead. These starter bacteria convert milk sugars into lactic acid. The milk should already be 90 degrees Fahrenheit at this point, and it must stay at this temperature for approximately 30 minutes while the milk ripens. During this ripening process, the milk's pH level drops, and the flavor of the cheese begins to develop. The rennet helps to set the cheese into a rubbery consistency. Curdling the milk. In this process, the rennet acts on the milk and allows the milk to form coagulated lumps, known as curds. As the solid curd forms, a liquid byproduct remains, known as whey. The milk is still in liquid stage at this point, so cheesemakers need to start manipulating the texture. Cutting the curd. The curds and whey mixture is allowed to separate and ferment until the pH reaches 6.4. For most soft varieties of cheese, the whey is removed from the curds and the cheese is virtually complete. At this point, the curd should form a large coagulated mass in the cheesemaking vat. Then, cheesemakers use long curd knives that can reach the bottom of the vat to cut through the curds. Cutting the curd creates more surface area on the curd, which allows the curds and whey to separate even more. Cheesemakers usually make crisscrossing cuts vertically, horizontally, and diagonally to break up the curd. The size of the curds after cutting can influence the cheese's level of moisture. Larger chunks of curd retain more moisture, leading to moister cheese, and smaller pieces of curd can lead to drier cheese. Some fresh cheeses are curdled only by acidity, but most cheeses use rennet. Softer, smaller, fresher cheeses are curdled with a greater proportion of acid to rennet than harder, larger, longer-aged varieties. Swiss starter cultures also include Propionibacter shermani, which produces carbon dioxide gas bubbles during aging, giving Swiss cheese or Emmental its holes. Curd processing. In this stage, the curd continues to be processed involving cooking the curds and stirring the curds or both. All of this processing is still aimed at separating the curds and whey. In other words, the curds continue to acidify and release moisture as they are processed. The more the curds are cooked and stirred, the drier the cheese will be. Thus this is the important stage in cheesemaking, especially for harder cheeses. Another process at this stage is washing, which means replacing whey with water. This affects the flavor and texture of the cheese. Washed curd cheeses tend to be more elastic and have a nice, mild flavor. Some examples of washed curd cheeses are Gouda, Havarti, and Swedish Fontina. Draining the whey. In this stage, the curds and whey are sufficiently separated by draining the whey from the vat, leaving only the solid chunks of curd. These chunks could be big or small, depending on how finely the curd has been cut. There are different means of draining whey. In some cases, cheesemakers allow it to drain off naturally. For harder cheeses that require a lower moisture content, cheesemakers are likely to get help from a mold or press. Putting pressure on the curd compacts and forces more whey out. Cheddaring the cheese. For some cheeses, another step to remove even more moisture from the curd is known as cheddaring. After cutting the mat of curd into sections, the cheesemaker will stack the individual slabs of curd. Stacking the slabs puts pressure on them, forcing out more moisture. Periodically, the cheesemaker repeats the process, cutting up the slabs of curd again and restacking them. The longer this process goes on, the more whey is removed from the curd, resulting in a denser, more crumbly finished cheese texture. Fermentation also continues during the cheddaring process, and the curd should reach a pH of 5.1 to 5.5. When it's ready, the cheesemaker mills the curd slabs, producing smaller pieces. Salting the cheese. The curd is now beginning to look more like cheese in its final form. To add flavor and also preventing the cheese from spoiling, cheesemakers can salt or brine the cheese. This can either involve sprinkling on dry salt or submerging the cheese into a brine. An example of a cheese that gets soaked in brine is mozzarella. Drier cheeses will be dry salted. Some cheeses have flavor added in other forms as well. Some examples of spices that find their way into some types of cheese are horseradish, garlic, paprika, habanero, and cloves. Cheese can also contain herbs, such as dill, basil, chives, or rosemary. Shaping the cheese. In this stage, the cheesemakers press the curd into molds to create standardized shapes. Molds can take the form of baskets or hoops. Baskets are molds that are only open on one end, and hoops are bottomless molds, meaning they only wrap around the sides of the curd. In either case, the milled curd mixture is pressed into the mold and left there for a certain amount of time to solidify into the right shape. These molds are usually round or rectangular. For some cheeses like mozzarella and provolone, the curd is stretched and kneaded in hot water, developing a stringy, fibrous body. Aging of cheese/ripening. For some cheeses, the process is already finished, but for many cheeses, what's known as aging remains. After curing, natural cheese begins a ripening process during which molecular changes take place that cause the cheese to harden and the flavor to intensify. It is stored, usually uncovered, at a controlled temperature and humidity until the desired texture and character is obtained. Ripening also involves monitoring oxygen levels to nurture the cheese to maturity. It is during the ripening process that cheeses take on their unique characteristics of flavor, texture, and aroma. The aging process can take anywhere from a few days to many years. In some cases, mold develops, which adds unique color and flavor to the cheese. Once the cheese has finished aging, it is finally ready to be enjoyed by consumers. Cheeses can be sold in whole wheels or blocks or by the wedge. Fresh cheese often has little flavor and can be quite rubber, hence types of cheese are left to ripen for a definite period of time. Ripening period is anywhere between a few days to years. During this time, the bacteria and enzyme activity changes the taste and texture of the cheese. There are two kinds of ripened cheeses, interior ripened and the surface ripened. Interior ripened cheese. In interior ripened cheese, ripening starts within and occurs throughout the body of the cheese. Cheese is vacuum-packed or waxed to ensure that no oxygen reaches the surface. Cheese with eyes, Swiss type, holes are formed in the softer parts of the cheese curd by bacteria, whereas cheese with no eyes, cheddar, lactic ferments ripen the cheese to make a uniformly smooth texture. Surface-ripened cheese. In surface-ripened cheese, microorganisms are applied to the surface of the cheese and ripening starts on the surface and progresses to the interior. These cheeses have surface rind. Rind. Rind is the outer surface of the cheese that creates a seal and helps control moisture loss during ripening. Rind is formed during the ripening process. As the outer layer of the cheese, the rind begins to develop into a harder exterior crust that helps to hold in the moisture and flavor of the remainder of the cheese. While the cheese rind is harder than the remainder of the cheese, it is still easily cut with a cheese knife or any sharp object. It provides protection against humidity loss, harmful bacteria, and damage due to handling. Washed. Refers to the process by which the rinds of certain cheeses are washed periodically during ripening, resulting in the coppery or beige color of marmarole and oca. Bloomy. A white, velvety ring usually found on soft cheeses. It's produced by spraying the cheese surface with penicillium. Waxed. The wax is sprayed on or hand-dipped to protect the curd. Mixed refers to a blend of molds or bacteria or other elements that a producer can use to provide a different rind structure for flavor and aroma. Unripened/fresh cheeses are those that are cut, packaged, and distributed for sale immediately after draining. Bocconcini is an unripened cheese. Pasta filata is Italian for cheese and is made with curd that is heated in hot way and mechanically stretched before being pressed into molds. The resulting cheeses are more elastic. Examples are Fior di Latte, Caciocavallo, mozzarella, and bocconcini.